Hello and welcome. I'm Stephanie Clark. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a professor of law here, and I was also the director of our Center for Justice Reform for a number of years. And really delighted to have you here today. As you know, the Social Justice Mission Scholars are a unique group of students on campus. They come here with a commitment already to social justice, and they go through a competitive application process that they have to demonstrate that commitment to creating a more just society. And they come here with this passion to make a difference in the world, right? And whatever area that ends up being. And then while they're here as part of the Social Justice Mission Scholars, they really cultivate their leadership with social justice by engaging in a number of projects that have a social justice mission. So then when they graduate, they fly away, they go off into the world, and they put into motion the vision that they came here with, and they go off and achieve great things. And we are very fortunate today to be able to recognize and honor 3 such alumni who are nominated by their peers because of their remarkable contributions to social justice. So these individuals are doing incredible work, and we're really privileged today to get to hear about their journeys and the work that they are doing. So for today's Swan Talk, I will introduce also my co-advisor, who's also my friend, and she's the Associate Dean of All Experiential Learning and Director of our JD Externship Program, Beth Locker, who's going to introduce our special guests for our Swan Talk today.
Hi, everyone. It really is an honor to be a part of this event. Over the course of this hour, I get the pleasure of introducing all 3 speakers, 2 who are here with us in person and 1 who is with us online. Despite the long record of their accomplishments, I am going to keep my remarks about each of them really short to maximize the time that we have for you to hear directly from them about their work, and then for us to have a conversation at the end. The first speaker actually is our speaker who is online. And I do believe that she may have to drop off early before we get to the speaking event. We had some adjustments to our schedule today, unfortunately, but I am really delighted to be able to introduce this first speaker, Nicole Dewing, who is joining us. We initially thought that she'd be joining us from Senegal, where she works, but it turns out she is actually a bit closer today due to some family obligations. Despite the family situation that called her home, to the United States, Nicole's passion and care for all of you here and for the importance of inspiring future social justice advocates meant she still found a way to join us, which I really appreciate. Nicole, thank you for that. Nicole earned her Master's of Studies in Environmental Law, the MSL, which was sort of a precursor to some of the other master's degrees that we have here in 1993. Here in the United States, she worked in environmental education and on labor rights issues, but her award nomination really stems primarily from her work in West Africa, which started when she went to Senegal as part of the Peace Corps in 2005. And she has largely been there ever since. And her accomplishments are many, including developing a solid waste management system, creating an organic farm and sustainable agriculture teaching center, and creating carbon credits and plastic credits business. So please welcome Nicole Dewing back to VLGS.
Hello, hi.
So, there we go, there's Nicole.
Can you hear
Nicole,
me?
I think whenever you're ready, I think we're going to have to figure out how to turn up the volume. I've got somebody here, and then we can also pull up your PowerPoint.
Okay, super. I'm not sure if you can see me. I see you all. Thank you for inviting me. I'm really happy to be here. And yes, was supposed to be in Senegal, but I'm in Boston. My mother, it's actually her 91st birthday, and she got out of the hospital today. So we're celebrating her getting out of the hospital and her 91st birthday. So I'm very happy to be with everyone and very honored to be invited and to be included on this panel. I do live in Senegal, West Africa. It's the country that's the most western point of the African continent. If you're looking at Africa and you see this little triangle sticking out, that's Dakar where I live. And I also own a organic farm, which is about 100 kilometers south of Dakar, which I'm not going to talk about today, but that's a big hobby of mine. On the weekends, my husband and I are at the farm, and we grow all kinds of uh, what I would call American vegetables. We grow curly kale and Swiss chard and collard greens. So I always joke, if I die tomorrow, they'll put on my tombstone, the woman who brought curly kale to West Africa. So we now have 5 or 6 other farms that copy us, which is a big deal. And so someone's actually knocking at my mom's door, but I will ignore that. And so I'm really excited and honored to be here today, and thank you for inviting me. I just wanted to start off on a few things. One is I graduated, well, I'm in the 1991 class, but in reality, I'm in the 1993 class because I ended up getting mono when I was at Vermont Law School and missed about 2 classes, so I had to make up for them. And the time in your life when you're like, oh my gosh, I have mono, this is terrible. I just started law school. What worse things could happen? Well, end up being a blessing in disguise. And I ended up going to Latvia in 1992 when the communism had just finished and the wall had come down. And I did my thesis to make up for the credits that I had missed in Latvia. And so, hold on one second. Someone keeps knocking at the door. Sorry, this was a very impromptu thing. My mother's not here. Yeah. Okay. Sorry. Nothing like.
People go away.
Yeah, right. So anyhow, I ended up going to Latvia to Riga, and I worked on, I'm sure you've all heard of Act 250. So I worked on my thesis looking at, right after communism, the Ministry of Environment that was newly created, the laws that they were creating on land use planning. And I was working with Project Harmony at the time. And it ended up being one of the most amazing experience, thanks to Vermont Law School, that I was able to have, where I did a master's thesis on the environmental laws in Latvia and compared them looking at Act 250. And while I was doing that, we received money to bring over 3 experts on Act 250. This is in 1992, so it's very different than today, to come and work with the Ministry of Environment in Latvia. So I ended up managing that program, and at the same time got 6 credits. So it was an amazing experience to have been able to do that, and I'm very grateful for Vermont Law School for that experience. And that sort of started my career in the international world, working in law and just being overseas. The other thing I just want to add, that Vermont Law School was, I think, the best education I ever had. And why do I say that? Is mainly because it gave me confidence that I didn't have before. And I was living in Montpelier right after I graduated from Vermont Law School, and I ran for the city council. I ran against a 10-year incumbent at the time. And I never would have had the courage or the confidence to do that if I had not gone to Vermont Law School and had the courage to know that I can do this. I went to Vermont Law School. I understand civics because I really learned, my civics education came from Vermont Law School. I learned something, and I feel like I could be a valuable member of the Montpelier City Council. And I believed in myself. And I think that came from my education. And then shortly after that, I was a lobbyist for the Vermont State Employees Association. I worked up at the State House drafting legislation that had to do with everything that had to do with state employees, from state troopers to the Vermont State Hospital. And again, my education at Vermont Law School gave me that confidence to be able to apply for that job, and I think to do a good job. So I owe a lot to Vermont Law School. And then I joined the Peace Corps. And then the Peace Corps took me to Senegal. It's a very personal story how I ended up there, but I ended up in Senegal at the age of 40. So I was an older Peace Corps volunteer. And from there, I was asked to work for Peace Corps, Director of Peace Corps in Senegal. And then I got married to my husband, who's Senegalese. So 17 years later, I'm still I'm still in Senegal in West Africa. And with my husband, we started a carbon credit and plastic credit company. And I'm sure most of you have heard of carbon credits, which is not what I'm here to talk about. And carbon credits has gotten a lot of bad press recently in many articles, but I'm here to talk about plastic credits, which is a very new field and has just started 2 years ago. And we are very proud. The company that we started is called Africa Carbon and Commodities. And it's the very first company project, I should say, the very first project to be registered in Africa that has a plastic credit carbons. They keep knocking on my door. This is a great day. Plastic credits. It's the first plastic credits project to be registered in Africa. So all of you are probably saying to yourself, what are plastic credits? And plastic credits was started by the international community to address the immense problem of plastic pollution in Africa and developing countries. So where I live in Senegal, more plastic waste. This is hard to really think about what I'm about to say. This is a hard fact to digest. More plastic waste goes into the ocean in Senegal than the entire United States of America. Now, in the US, we produce much, much more plastic waste than Senegal. Senegal is about the size of North Dakota and has a population of 16 million people. But in the US, we manage our plastic waste better. Now, for people in the US sitting there saying, well, that's not true, that can't be possible. If you've been to Africa and you've been to some developing countries, you would understand that the amount of plastic waste that's found everywhere in the environment is huge, and Senegal is no exception. And so Senegal does not do a good job of managing its plastic waste. So that's why plastic credits was started by the international community to be able to find a way to finance projects in countries that mismanage or don't manage well their plastic waste. And so the international community created plastic credits through a verified and validated program that allows financing to the private sector. So why the private sector? Well, if some of you have lived overseas or have been in some of the countries where I've lived in Africa, the international community would prefer not to give the money to the governments directly, but to finance activities in the private sector, because in the private sector, they know that the money is going to get directly to where the money needs to go to continue to finance and grow the activities. So a plastic credit is for every 1 ton of plastic that is collected or removed from the environment, you have 1 plastic credit. For every 1 ton of plastic that is recycled, you have 1 plastic credit. And so the amount of plastic credits we have with the first project in Africa is 9,295 credits, which means that we've been able to collect and recycle 9,295 tons of plastic in Senegal, basically repurpose it, and it's part of a circular economy. And we work with 3 partners that are recycling companies that collect and recycle the plastic. And our job is to help them obtain the criteria for plastic credits, meaning that we provide a monitoring and evaluation system. We go in and we figure out a system to track the plastic. So for every 1 kilo that's taken out of the environment, we need to track it. And for every 1 kilo that's recycled, we need to create a tracking system. And then we need to make sure that they're complying with sort of the international standards, that there's no children working under the age of 16. You don't have babies on the back while women are picking through waste in the landfills. And we're making sure that they can be compliant with sort of very strict environmental and social standards. So the idea of plastic credits is, I'll pick on Coca-Cola, they're not here to defend themselves, is that Coca-Cola say, we want to diminish our plastic footprint in countries where they don't have a good solid waste management system. And plastic is what I call leaking into the environment. So how can we, Coca-Cola, be part of the solution? What they can do is they can purchase plastic credits, which has been validated and verified by an independent auditor. So we have very strict criteria to meet, because frankly, there's lots and lots of projects out there saying we're collecting plastic waste, we're recycling, but it's not being audited and it's not being verified. And we are under the Vera standard. Vera is based in Washington, D.C., and they have the plastic standard that we are required to follow. It's a very strict standard. I went through an audit just recently. It took over a year to go through the audit to prove that everything that we wrote in the application, which was over 100 pages, was accurate. And they actually came on site and visited the 3 recycling centers, visited all the collection points for the plastic waste, and they verified that what we were saying was accurate. And so it's a verified program. So the plastic credits that are being bought by Coca-Cola have been verified and validated by an independent auditor, as well as Vera, based in Washington, D.C. And Vera is the body that issues the plastic credits. So it's the same as carbon credits, but they're issuing plastic credits instead. So if you end up buying 1,000 plastic credits, you're basically buying 1,000 tons of either collection plastic waste that was collected out of the environment or plastic waste that was recycled. So we are a very ambitious company. We are now creating our second plastic credits project. It's along the coast of Africa from Mauritania all the way down to Sierra Leone, because our belief is, sure, might help solve the problem with plastic waste along the coast of Africa and Senegal, which has over 700 kilometers of coastline. But we also need to deal with the plastic waste along the west coast of Africa. It's a huge problem. So even if we address it in Senegal, all the surrounding countries are still emitting a lot of plastic waste into the oceans along the coast. So it's a company. We started this project 2 years ago. The company's been going for about 7 years now. My husband does the carbon credit side, so I'm not as comfortable talking about carbon credits, but plastic credits is my thing. And very, very proud of what we were able to accomplish, because the plastic waste and plastic recycling sector is a very informal sector, completely different than in the US. And the target is not just to reduce plastic waste in the environment and also keep it from getting into the ocean, but also there's a whole social impact to it. And we work very closely with waste pickers. And waste pickers are the ones that are in the landfills, they're in the dump sites, they're the ones collecting the plastic from the beaches, from the public areas. And most of them are women's groups and women that we work with. And we also work with the collectors, providing them the necessary materials they need to be able to collect. And story after story has shown that just a little bit of help can help someone who does not have a formal education. They're very extremely intelligent, but they're not formally educated. And if you provide them a living collecting plastic waste, not only you're helping the environment, but you're helping someone be able to have a dignified job, because before they were on the streets either selling vegetables or doing menial work and often not getting paid for it, and in some very dangerous situations late at night, some of the women. And so we were able to get them off the streets and working in collection businesses, collecting and sorting the plastic and washing it and bringing it to the recycling centers to get paid pretty well for the plastic they're able to collect. And they're also a very integral part of the community that they're working in, and adding a real economic and environmental value to the community. So I don't want to talk too much. I know I only have 10 minutes, but it's a business that I'm very proud of, because we not only work on how do we get plastic waste out of the environment and recycle it, repurpose it, but we also work with people that are really try to say how the best way to say it, that really need our help. And we work very closely with the Waste Pickers Association, not only in Senegal, but internationally. So I've been involved with the INC, which is the Intergovernmental Negotiating Committee. If some of you have heard about it, its next meeting is going to be in South Korea. And it was just, the last meeting was in Ottawa. And they're creating an international legally binding treaty to deal with plastic pollution that all the countries in the world are involved in. And so we go with the waste pickers to be a part of lobbying and representing them at these conferences, or not conferences, these negotiating committees. So that's a real quick view of plastic credits, and I'm sure you have lots of questions, and the work that we do in Senegal, and then hopefully soon along the coast from Mauritania, Sierra Leone. And then the last thing I just want to add is our last project Another very ambitious project has to do with ghost gear. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but ghost nets. So basically, they're nets that are discarded in the ocean, fishing nets, or discarded in the beaches. And it's a huge problem because, number one, they're illegal in West Africa. They're the nylon nets, but they're very light. But they don't last very long, and they're still imported because there's no enforcement to prevent them from being imported into West Africa, and they're used by fishermen, and they're discarded after 6, 7, 8 months, and often they end up in the ocean. And so we have a ambitious project also to collect what's called ghost gear, these discarded nets and discarded fishing gear from the oceans, from the beaches, and provide collection points where the fishermen, instead of throwing their nets away, can bring their nets once they've been cleaned and be paid to bring their nets to be that they collect, and be paid to deliver their nets to what are called kiosks, these little collection points throughout the different countries we're working in. And then the nylon nets will be recycled. Right now, unfortunately, they cannot be recycled in West Africa. They need to be sent to Switzerland and Italy, where a company called Aquafil, which takes the nets and recycles them into something called Ecoville, which becomes a thread. And companies like Chanel use that to make bathing suits, to make purses and backpacks. And so it's a whole part of a circular commodity, circular economy, using ghost net gear that was in the ocean along the beaches and collecting it as well. That becomes part of the clothing that we wear today. So that's another ambitious project that we are starting in 2025.
Thank you so much, Nicole. I really appreciate all the efforts you've put in. I hope you all will join me in thanking Nicole.
Okay. Sorry, I just lost everybody, but yeah, so.
Thank you. And thank you for joining us today when you have so much going on in your life, because I know this was a challenge, and we do appreciate it. Our next speaker, Lou, if you want to come up while I'm introducing you, I really do appreciate that as well. Lou Helmuth received his JD from VLS in 1984. And a few of you may have had the pleasure of hearing Lou speak earlier today about work he did in his previous position with the organization Our Children's Trust, which brought the groundbreaking Held v. Montana case, arguing for youth's constitutional right to a clean and healthy environment. Lou's work at Our Children's Trust also included the Juliana v. United States case. And the nomination for Lou was beautifully written and made a compelling case for why, when you build an environmental advocacy career that's centered around defending dignity and justice for all animals, large and small, including human animals, are a true social justice warrior. And in that spirit of defending those, both large and small, the nominator offered my favorite line in his nomination, saying that metaphorically, Lou is the Lorax. Please welcome Lou Helmuth and the Lorax back to the LGS.
Thank you very much. Hi, everyone. I will try and be quick about things so that we make sure to give big time to talk about their work. Congratulations. Wow, Nicole's. Holy crow, how cool is that? Yeah. So, yeah, well, so I'm honored to be here as one of the nominees. I thank my nominator for those kind words. But you know, I'm really here as a part of a much larger effort. It's not Lou Helmuth. It's the effort that I've been a part of for the last 15 years or so, which is Our Children's Trust. We're a nonprofit public interest law firm that represents young people exclusively to enforce what we believe are their constitutional rights to a safe climate. And we do that around the US, in other countries, but it's a collective effort. It's not my own. It's more the brainchild of Julia Olson, who is the executive director and chief legal counsel, and also Professor Mary Wood at the University of Oregon, who's kind of the godmother of all of this, who came up with the thesis of an atmospheric trust that the law needs to protect We can't denigrate our atmosphere. Governments can't create policies to denigrate our atmospheres when we know the consequences to young people. So we represent all these kids, multiple legal actions to try and effectuate science-based climate policy. As the reproductive rights community learned after Dobbs v. Jackson overruled Roe versus Wade, you need a multi-jurisdictional, multi-prong, multi-level, diverse approach when you're in the courts fighting for social justice, no matter what the issues are. And so our effort is a multi-jurisdictional, multi-pronged, multi-strategic kind of effort because relative to the climate crisis as a social justice issue, unfortunately, it's one of, if not the only social justice issue that we must resolve in this generation. Unlike other social justice issues, which unfortunately are not resolved by this generation, can be resolved in future generations, science tells us we have to get this right this go round. So we have a really small window in which to effect science-based climate policy, and our Children's Trust is going in to effectuate systemic relief in this regard through a number of legal efforts. All of our cases are science-based. We're fighting for a scientific prescription that will bring carbon dioxide from where it is today at about 423 parts per million down to 350 parts per million by the year 2100. That's a tall order. It is possible. It's scientifically, economically proven. We can do it. We just have to decide we are going to do that. So we're trying to get courts to force governments to comport their behavior to that scientific prescription. All of our cases are constitutional cases against governments. It's not the fossil fuel industry that's the real villain here. It's the governments that license them to do everything that they do. So it's completely within government's power to enforce a scientific prescription against an industry if it so chooses. So we are challenging affirmative action. The governments, they give tax incentives, they permit projects, they allow things to go forward affirmatively. They consider it and they say, yes, you can do that, you can do that, you can do that, right? And when they say yes knowing of the consequences. We know it's going to really be bad, and we know it's going to cause the glaciers to melt more, and we know it's going to, put more, but we're going to permit. That's what our governments are doing. And we have constitutional rights, and young people that we represent have constitutional rights to life, to liberty, to property, to personal security, equal protection of the law, all of which I believe are, pretty basically out the window if your government is making those decisions that compromise your life, compromise your personal security, compromise your property, and don't treat young people with the same analysis that we approach for today's population, right? So constitutional cases against government seeking systemic relief. We want the courts to order that there is a constitutional right that is compromised when governments take affirmative action that doesn't comport with that scientific prescription. So if that's the case, then all government action will need to follow course and align with that scientific prescription that will stabilize our climate system if we do everything we know we should do. That's what our cases are about. So who's involved with this? Lou, right? Hundreds of really brave, wildly committed young people who are the plaintiffs in all of our cases. They lead all these cases. They are their own beings. It is their stories and their compromised rights. The staff at our Children's Trust, local counsel who we work with in some jurisdictions. Sometimes it's an OCT lawyer who handles a particular thing if we're licensed in the jurisdiction. If not, we associate with someone else. And that's what we do in all of our extra global domestic cases, we call them, outside of the United States. Experts, pro bono experts coming to this cause to support young people, to give their expertise in court Nobel laureates. It's remarkable, and thousands of amici in all of our cases, like from all sectors of civil society. So it's a huge community and a huge effort, and why I'm standing up here, I don't know. So we do this in all these different jurisdictions. We have 2 federal cases, Juliana versus United States and Genesis v. EPA. We have multiple state cases right now pending. Over the years, they've all come and gone. And, we have yet to get a case to trial until Held v. Montana just last year. And trying just to get these cases to trial so we can show that kids are harmed, that it's caused by the government, and that the courts can redress this harm through a declaratory relief or an injunction. And governments are fighting it tooth and nail. The person who is in charge of the United States Department of Justice, Environmental and Natural Resources Division under President Trump, when he was appointed to the position, he was told that his #1 priority was to, quote, kill Juliana versus United States, close quote. That's a big deal. This case is a big deal. If like the lead ENRD lawyer is told your #1 job when you take this is to get rid of that case. It's just remarkable how hard governments are fighting this. And there's all kinds of evidence of it, not the least of which is that 7 petitions for writs of mandamus have been filed in the Juliana case. That's crazy. It's unheard of. Never happened in any other case. It's just nuts. And we just lost again at the 9th Circuit in Juliana, May 1st, something like that, May 8th, on a petition for writ of mandamus, extreme remedy. Really hard for a court to grant a petition for mandamus. Like, I definitely do not think they met the criteria. I think it's an abusive process that they did, but they granted the petition for writ of mandamus and said, Juliana case can't proceed. The kids don't have standing. They are injured. It's caused by the government, but we can't redress the harm. So on redressability, we lost on standing. And so just a few weeks ago, our Children's Trust, filed a petition for en banc hearing at the 9th Circuit. So we're going to have an en banc review of that petition for mandamus grant, and we'll see. So Juliana continues. Genesis v. EPA, another federal case, similar, but again, we're like tweaking it, take a little bit of a different approach. So Juliana's in play and EPA is in play, all for the same type of remedy, get this scientific prescription for climate stabilization embedded into law. Genesis is a brand new case in the Central District of California. And as soon as we lost Juliana on that motion for that petition for writ of mandamus, the Central District came in and said, oh, Juliana just said, oh, I can't give you the relief, so I can't give you the relief because I'm in the 9th Circuit. But you have leave to amend. So we amended our case to kind of tweak that. So thank you for smiling at that. Like, it's like, no, you cannot, we will not go away. We will not go away. So those are our federal cases. We have a number of state cases. I'm going to quickly just talk about Held versus Montana, which is the first and only case that our children has ever taken to trial. We've been trying to get hundreds of them to trial, and everybody just is like, well, it's a good case, but we just like the Oregon Supreme Court said, this is not a case for today. What, right? But in a lot of these cases where, we're not like, you don't have a case, they're like these little procedural quirks. And so we go back. In Alaska, we've been to the Alaska Supreme Court twice. We just filed the 3rd case, right? Okay, you didn't like it this way, we'll try it again. Oh, you didn't like it this way, we'll try it again, right? And it keeps narrowing down and we're getting there. So all these federal cases, there's one in Virginia going to the that's pending with the Virginia Supreme Court. Utah is being argued before the Utah Supreme Court on September 4th. Then there's Held versus Montana. The only case we went to trial was last summer. And long and short is 16 young Montanans sued the state of Montana for their policy that says whenever we advance a fossil fuel project or an environmental project, we will not consider the impacts of climate change. So we're going to grant you your permit, no consideration of climate change. And we felt that that was unconstitutional against the Montana Constitution's right to a clean and healthful environment. Court found in our favor after all kinds of wild, wonderful expert testimony from all the young plaintiffs about the harms that they've experienced. And the court found in our favor. It said there is a constitutional right to a clean and healthful environment. It includes the climate crisis. And when you dump metric tons of carbon of CO2 into the atmosphere, you're denigrating the environment in violation of these kids' right to a clean and healthful environment. So we tied fossil fuel development to constitutional violation in Montana. That case is now before the Montana Supreme Court, being argued on the 10th, 8th. Can't recall. Our Children's Trust, it'll be live streamed on the Facebook page, so you can watch the argument. Wonderful gentleman, Roger Sullivan, will be arguing the case. And all in all, it's a huge effort. A lot of people. We've got a case in Canada, a case in Mexico, cases in Pakistan, India, and Uganda that are different because of country conditions. Mexico similarly. Canada's really moving forward. There's developmental efforts in all of the international agencies, the European Court of Human Rights, the International Tribunal on the Law of the Sea, and otherwise where we're arguing for this scientific standard, all to protect young kids' futures as I'm 65 years old, what I'm going to experience is nothing compared to what, a kid or many of you in this room are going to experience. That's different, right? And right now, the federal government discounts your futures. Let's just look at today. So it's just really a kind of an unfair situation that we're trying to right. And there's a whole lot of really good people contributing to the effort. And I thank you for thinking about it. Thanks.
Thanks, Lou.
Yeah.
I really do appreciate that. And now I have the pleasure of introducing our final speaker, who some of you who are here tomorrow will get to hear more about as well when they are actually given the award during that ceremony. But our final speaker is Big Hartman. And Big received their JD from VLS when both Big and Lou and Nicole earned their degrees. But Big got their JD in 2005 and currently serves as the executive director of the Vermont Human Rights Commission. Over the course of their career, they've focused on a range of civil and human rights issues, from preventing workplace harassment to the enforcement of anti-discrimination laws. Their work has been both at the individual case level and at the law reform level. At the end of June, a time when we so often receive news from the U.S. Supreme Court that can be upsetting, I am happy to share that one of my favorite things about Big, part of this was in a conversation we had fairly recently, is their very clear commitment to the education and mentoring of the next generation, or perhaps several generations of civil rights attorneys. And so please welcome Big Hartman back to VLGS.
Hi, thank you so much for having me today. It's really totally surreal to be standing here where I did attend many classes. And I'm really thankful for you all being willing to sit here on a beautiful Friday afternoon. Thank you, for recognizing me and offering me a chance to speak today. It is really, when I reflect on the person I was when I was sitting in this room as a law student, I literally have the job that I dreamed I would have now. And it only took about 20 years. It was a winding path of, human experience. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about my work with the Human Rights Commission. I'm going to talk a little bit about sort of the journey of being a mission-driven attorney, because I know many of us that were going to law school here had these same kind of dreams, and not all of us were fortunate enough to last in the movement. Are most of you law students? Nodding, and some staff and not law students. Okay, good. Just kind of like to know who I'm talking to. So at the Human Rights Commission, we are a state agency here in Vermont. We have three main areas of jurisdiction. One being the biggest area of cases that we work on is fair housing. So I didn't really learn anything about fair housing laws in Vermont, but it turns out they apply everywhere, federally and at the state level, and even a lot of like municipal and city ordinances will also include fair housing protections. We enforce the state fair housing protections, and we have a contract with HUD to investigate and do enforcement for the federal fair housing law violations that we find in Vermont. So the common types of cases that we see in housing, it's the whole range of any way that someone can experience an adverse housing action because of their membership in a protected class, right? A lot of those cases end up being disability related housing violations, like reasonable accommodation requests, denials, and that type of thing. But we also see a lot of cases involving other types of discrimination, including like in Vermont, it's a protected class to receive public assistance. So denying housing because someone is on Social Security or because they get a housing choice voucher is actually illegal. So the second area of our jurisdiction is discrimination in places of public accommodation, a whole nother area of the law that I think a lot of people don't know exists, and I certainly didn't when I was in law school. This is like anytime someone is in the public or working or like having an interaction with government, they are protected from discrimination. A lot of the protections are like mirroring the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, but we also find a lot of cases involving especially schools and police that, people are protected from racial discrimination and harassment. Those make up a large portion of our public accommodations cases. The third area that we do is employment, but only for state employees. So employment discrimination, but only claims brought by state of Vermont employees or people applying for state government. And so just in case you didn't know, the Attorney General's office at the state of Vermont Civil Rights Unit, they handle all other employee discrimination claims in the state. So that's our jurisdiction. We do we could get this work done in these three areas by accepting complaints. We have like this mighty staff of 7 human beings, including me, and one of them who is here today and has managed to last 5 whole years in the work. It's very tiring work. So some of the things I want to talk about is how we sustain ourselves in being mission-driven attorneys. But we receive complaints at the Human Rights Commission from anybody who's just trying to do something in Vermont and thinks they might have been discriminated against. If we hear enough that it sounds like it could be a complaint under our jurisdiction, then we initiate an investigation with 3 investigators working statewide. And if they find that it's likely that discrimination did occur, we have the ability to take the case into court with our one litigator, who's like a brand new position that was just created this year. But we have the statutory authority to enforce these laws for the public interest in court if we need to. A lot of the cases can wind up either resolving through our involvement, just having a neutral third party gathering facts and talking to people. We can often find a solution that will eliminate the discrimination and allow people to kind of move on with their lives. Some of our cases result in what we call a no reasonable grounds determination, but the ones that we go reasonable grounds on, we can enforce those complaints in court through regular trial litigation process. Another piece of our work at the Human Rights Commission is around policy and advising legislators, policymakers throughout the state on relevant issues, which we have one director of policy education and outreach and myself. We kind of tag team that work. And also we work, are participating in legislative committee testimony when the session is on. So we're all like super busy and trying to do as much work as we can. I became an investigator at the Human Rights Commission in 2021 and just became director about a year ago. I am very proud of my first year on this job in terms of being able to, innovate with our practices, some of how the way that we were closing out cases so that now we're able, I think, to move our cases through a little bit faster. They were taking like a couple of years, which isn't really ideal for folks who are seeking some relief from a traumatizing and terrible situation. We've accepted more cases than ever to investigate, and we have more litigation now in-house being handled than ever. We currently have 11 cases filed in Superior Court, and one of those has been appealed to the Vermont Supreme Court. And I'm also really proud that just last month I was able to be a part of one of the largest settlements that the Human Rights Commission has ever seen, of a case that went reasonable grounds involving racial harassment of a student in a school. And so we were able to obtain $175,000 settlement for that family and get the school district to promise to do a long-term training program with all of their staff around handling harassment issues and hopefully preventing them from reoccurring. So, yeah, that's kind of the broad brush. I could talk a lot about where is civil rights going and what do we need to do, but I didn't think about talking about that today. I thought about, okay, social justice scholars and what are the things that I wish people had told me about being in this work. And it's been a really long and hard journey. I think being a lawyer, any kind of lawyer, is really hard. It's really demanding. It's got a lot of pressures. You got to kind of be on your game all the time. And you're usually carrying a six-figure law school debt. So when we think about being doing social justice work, we have those added challenges that we're facing around being able to sustain ourselves financially. That, these jobs generally don't pay as much as the private firms are going to be able to pay you. We're feeling that weight of being, of pushing against the status quo. We feel that weight of wanting to see change in our world and knowing we're stuck in these systems that don't always allow for the change that we know our world needs. And it's really common and easy for many of us to get burnt out and need to take breaks, need to step away, or just like shift gears at some point in our career. I certainly had moments along my journey where I had to stop and say, is this really what I can keep doing? Can I keep it together and still do this fight and serve the movement that I want to be a part of? And I do remember, wait a minute. Okay, I'm organized. I have all my thoughts together on this Friday afternoon. I did want to make clear too, what do I mean by being a mission-driven attorney? I define it as a lawyer who dedicates their efforts to advancing a mission of making the world a better place for all people, not just serving the wealthy and the well-off. Someone whose goal is not just to make money, to earn a living, to pay off their loans, to help clients, to facilitate transactions, to win in court, or any of that, but really using our legal knowledge to contribute to the world and to our society in meaningful and positive ways, trying to advance the greater interests of equality and justice and a healthy, functioning democracy that actually serves all people. Some of my little nuggets of wisdom of how to sustain ourselves in this work. First is not to allow ourselves to be swayed by the people who are not doing this kind of work. I was a child who always felt that the world needed change. I just knew it in my gut. I didn't know what I was gonna do about it, but I knew something and I knew something was wrong and that I had to be a part of trying to make the world a better place. So I was often called a dreamer. I was called idealistic, especially when I was here in this law school. And I very well remember a conversation with a very esteemed professor in my first year of law school here, not in this room, but in the other room on this floor. It's like burned in my memory because we were required to take a class first year called Intro to Lawyering. Are they still doing that? Okay, so, it was a lot of like, okay, a client comes into your office and he has this problem and what are you gonna do next? Those always the scenario, like every class. And I started to kind of struggle with this hypothetical being very narrow. So I remember approaching the professor after class one-on-one and saying, hey, like, I was just wondering if we were maybe going to talk about other kinds of lawyering. And he looked at me and said, well, what do you see yourself doing after law school? And I said, and it was so funny because I looked back and I was like, I don't know, maybe like some kind of like nonprofit, like small office, like doing like good community civil rights work or something. And he said, well, I think you better rethink what you're doing in law school.
Oh.
So those, yeah, exactly. So those kinds of experiences actually did not sway me at all, right? But they got me all fired up. And I was like, oh, see, that's the problem. And I'm like, as I look back on my 20-something-year-old self, like being faced with that and growing up in a conservative family, there were no activists or radicals around me when I was younger. People were just like, oh, you did so good in law school. Why aren't you just getting a job like for one of these firms in New York? You can make six figures. You're going to be so rich. It's going to be great. And I really just outwardly rejected all of those ideas. And I just want to say you don't need to do that path and to trust like your inner knowing of what your purpose is here with this one life that you get. And I'm really proud of my 20-something-year-old self who was just like, yeah, you're wrong. I hear you and I don't agree. I am going to do this and I'm going to figure out my own path. And as I went on that path, and ironically, I worked for the same Vermont State Employees Association for many years in Montpelier as part of the labor movement that Nicole mentioned working at. I thought, okay, labor movement, I'm doing the labor movement. That's what I'm doing. And when my path took a turn after I left that organization, and I really didn't know what was going to be next. And I think that even when I graduated law school, I was applying for all the good fellowships and the social justice jobs, and I didn't get any of those. And it was Abby Armstrong who said to me, you don't need to get the job. You need to get a job. Just get a job. And then you will find the next job that will be the job. That first job I got, I did the private practice thing for like a year and a half. I got to represent injured workers, suing insurance companies, doing workers' comp cases. And it was awesome. It was surprisingly affirming that there still was like places to fight for social justice, even when you were like at a firm, and I didn't love reading medical records and I did move on, but it was one of those things where the skills I learned from that job were the necessary foundation to getting the next job that gave me the courage and confidence to start my own law practice. I called it Welcoming Workplaces, inspired by the Me Too movement, like speaking around my experiences of workplace harassment, workplace discrimination, and knowing that more and more of us were coming out, fighting that and wanting to teach others about healthy workplaces. So that path, I never could have predicted would land me where I am now. I didn't know where I was going along the path. I just kind of kept going and saying, doing those gut checks of like, am I still doing the work? Am I still, am I still following that inner knowing that I need to be doing good work? I'll try to wrap this up, but I think some of the other little nuggets I'll throw out there. It has been really important for me as I look back on my work to continually be realistic about what we can achieve. And that doesn't mean we don't still have the dreams and the vision, but this work rarely wins. These cases are hard. Litigation isn't always the answer. The law is often stacked against people who are marginalized and, not a part of how the system was built. We will sometimes fail clients. We will not get what we went for. We will be heartbroken and disappointed. And we will, even when you win, you never really feel like you win. It can still be really like a mixed bag of an experience. You can be grossly disappointed and almost devastated by others in the movement with you and the systems that you're fighting against. And I think, in order to make it through that reality, we inspire one another. We surround ourselves with others who are in the movement. We go to conferences. We get together with the other people who are not the naysayers, the people who we know that if we need to tap out for a little while, they're going to be there and they're going to keep doing that work. And you'll come back when you are in a good place to do that. And I really have felt like BLS provided a lot of sources of inspiration for me. Shirley Jefferson, as the Dean of Students, supported me and several other students from the National Lawyers Guild to go to a national convention in Birmingham, Alabama, where we got to hear like civil rights speakers who were like, in the marches, in the early civil rights movement. And I really feel like I have picked up that torch because I got to see and hear from those individuals like in real life, and it moved me, and it set that vision up for me to be able to actually land where I am now. So while we are inspired by others, we also do mentoring and try our best to inspire our colleagues and our coworkers and the young lawyers. We really need a new crop of civil rights attorneys everywhere, and especially in Vermont. That's one of the things I think I'm most proud about at the Human Rights Commission is being in a director position allows you to really help create a workplace culture that is supportive, that is loving, that is authentic, where we can cheer each other on, we can vent, we can take care of each other with like mutuality and respect, and know that we're all sharing this mission of our agency, which is to protect full civil and human rights in Vermont. So that is how I will close, and I'm right at 4:30, so I guess I got in the time at least. Thank you.
Thank you, Big, and thank you, Lou, and thank you, Nicole. I think might still be with us. We are really at 4:30. We normally try to do some question and answer, but I'm going to respect people's time and maybe perhaps ask if people want to just informally ask you some questions on the side, they would have that opportunity to do that, if that's okay with everyone. And I will thank all of you for joining us and all of the people online as well. We really appreciate it. And I know this is always so inspiring for me. This is one of my favorite things every year is to hear about the work you're doing because it really is terrific. And to be able to share that with students is just invaluable. So thank you so much.
Thank you.